the texting has yet to fail us. If you text ABC High Life to that number 22333, you can take this poll. A couple questions that would be good to just engage you right out of the gate with your current tech usage in your home. And then we'll get started in a few minutes. So if you could answer those questions on ABC High Life, you could text that number, or text ABC High Life to that number, 22333. Is it working? They don't need to be uppercase. So we're taking a quick poll. You could either go to pollev.com/ABC High Life and answer the questions there, or text the message ABC High Life to the number 22333, and then we'll get started as we see some of those results come in. All right, is it letting you answer more than one question or no? You got it? Thank you. All right, the questions are all active right now for you to answer. We added more questions. Go to pollev.com pollev.com/ABC High Life. Is it not working for you? No? Yep. See, text awesome and then it's not. All right. Eric, do you have? Are you refreshing it or no? All right. Do you want to just show the results then, Eric? So here's the results from last session because it worked flawlessly before. I don't know what happened, but tech it's definitely up and down all around, as you guys know. I've seen multiple people hitting their phones after the new iOS update comes out, thinking Apple's sabotaging you. So how many devices are in your home? I think most of you got this question, and the rest of them we'll look at the results. 33% said 1 to 2, 17% said 3 to 4, 5 to 6 devices in the household are the same as 1 to 2. 7 or more was only 17%. Let's see the next poll. So how many devices have filters that you control? 75%. Maybe some of you got that question, but in the other session said that 75% of the devices have no filters that parents control on their devices. Next question. What social media is your kid using? Do you have access to their account? So here's a couple. None. Insta Facebook, Insta Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, yes and no. And there's some others. None at this time, so I don't need access. Yay. If you're a parent that has students using social media, you're probably like, oh man, I wish I was back there. Or they weren't distracted and engaged in that. Facebook and no. And the next poll. How to keep my kids safe as possible on the internet is the response. What are you hoping to learn today? So hopefully Zach and I can give you some helpful tips and encourage you to continue having conversations and apps and different things you can use to help keep your students safe using the devices that navigate the internet. All right. Today we're going to look at we'll jump into our slideshow. And you guys have a packet. Most of the content that we're going to go over is in your packet. There's also a contract, cell phone agreement we're going to go over. And we're going to start just by looking at you guys as parents, your role, encourage you, and then we'll look at some just common uses for cell phones and really the heart of the issue. And then we'll look at some apps and some ways you can control the usage. So let me go ahead and open an order of prayer, and then we'll dive in. Lord, we thank you for these parents who are being intentional and learning here and just engaging in a conversation about where we're headed as a culture and the devices that you have allowed to be at our fingertips. And Lord, may we have your wisdom and knowledge in how to discern using them and how to lead their kids and the youth in making wise decisions on the devices. In Jesus' name, amen. So the definition of parent, I looked it up. And it's a father or a mother, second an ancestor, precursor, or a source, origin, or cause, a protector or guardian. So in that sense, you're guarding your kids, you're encouraging them, setting up some helpful guard rails, so to speak, and really that starts with a conversation. That starts with a conversation that broaches subjects that are maybe hard, sometimes easy, but hopefully helpful nonetheless. And the first verse I want to share with you guys is Deuteronomy 6. And so if we can get that up there, Deuteronomy 6 reminds us as parents that you shall teach them diligently to your children and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. And these are God's commandments. This is who God is, what he's done, and any and every situation. As parents, it's our job to really talk about that and bring up either issues culturally that relate to the gospel and who he is and what he's doing in our lives, or just here's a story that I'm just processing. What do you think about it? And bringing students along in that conversational tone that'll allow for opportunities to bring up even just use of social media and technology. The second verse is Ephesians. So if we can get that verse up there. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. And Ephesians 6 is super helpful in that, because I think as fathers especially, just black and white, cut to the point, here's what we're doing, right and wrong. But a lot of times kids need the engagement of a conversation, sitting, talking, discussing what's right, what's wrong, what's the culture view as right and wrong, what does God view as right and wrong. And in that dialogue is where we seek to go with you and share some helpful things that we've learned and things that we're even implementing in our own lives to safeguard the use of the internet and texting. To start off, I wanted to just dive in and look at some some cell phone texting and common uses, which are somewhat alarming. So if we can get those up there. Number one use of cell phones is checking the time. So most students whip their phone out, check the time. Secondly, they use their phones to text. So 9 out of 10 times, looks like the second use of using their phones is texting. 51% of girls feel the pressure from a guy to send a sexual text message. 34% of girls sent sexual text messages to try and feel sexy or more attractive. And many teens text nonstop, and they feel the need to always be on or available. I don't know if you've caught that drift from this generation, but as a youth pastor, the past 2 years especially have been that the tension has risen to where if I don't get back to them from a text within 20 to 30 seconds, then I'm a jerk and I hate them and I just don't want to have anything to do with them, is the tone. They'll say, hey, did you get this? What's going on? And it's like, oh my goodness, like there's this new cultural standard of you have a minute, and if you blow it, then what's wrong with you? Like, what are you doing? And it's alarming. And so texting is the new conversation for a lot of the teens. And lastly, it can be severely addicting. This is something where students feel like they always have to have their phone around them, on to text, to post, and they're no longer just living in the moment of what's going on and what God's teaching them. They're constantly trying to capture it, post it, make sure the filter is the right way, the tag, the hashtag, all these things are done so that they get the most likes, and they're finding their identity more and more in that. Now we're going to look at some ways that you can use texting and engage with them, since it's the second most common way teens use their phones to engage and encourage them.
Yeah, so when we say that texting is a way that students are always on, of course we're referring to Instagram, private messaging, we're referring to Snapchat, direct messaging. Just any form of kind of communication electronically between students is what they feel like they always have to be on, and if they're not, then they're missing something. And that's the thing, I think the second the student turns off their cell phone, they think that they've missed a lot. And the reality is they're missing a lot while they're staring at their phones. And so for you guys to kind of lean in, if your student already has a cell phone, there's great ways that you can connect with them through texting. Ways just like sending a statement that you did great at this today, or that I hope you do fantastic on your exam, or hang in there, the day is almost over. There's lots of statements like that.
Yeah, additionally, you can say, can't wait to hear about your day. I love you. And one of my favorites is sending an inspirational scripture. Always perks them up. And we picked one for you guys to write down. Whoever spares the rod hates their children. It's a great just reminder, hey, God loves those who he disciplines is another one. Just if they're going through a hard time or they're blowing it.
Children, respect your parents, Ephesians 6.
Yeah.
That's a good one to send them.
First commandment with a promise. It's great. For you'll live long. You could read further on in Leviticus, because if they disobey you, then, the consequence is death. So, yeah, it's lighthearted text. Scripture, always helpful to lighten the mood going through a hard day.
Really send them the whole book of Leviticus. Just kind of chunk by chunk would be a really good idea daily. Yeah.
Yeah, and so with social media, texting, we're going to get in at the end of our time. We're going to try and run through this and open up for questions. It's ultimately, the major pitfalls are, first, we're going to see just the availability, but it's the dangers of availability of everything, mainly even pornography and explicit images. So.
When students have access to smartphones, we know that they have powerful computers in the palm of their hand. I'm also, for those of you who don't know, I'm the junior high director here, if that wasn't clear, that Brandon's the high school and student ministries pastor here. I'm the junior high guy, Zach, and I have a dual role. So I'm also a teacher in the public school. I've been at Atascadero Middle School for 6 years now. I teach 8th grade history, and I'm also the leadership program director on our campus. And so over there, we've seen that students have a stronger computer in their hands than most laptops, most PCs, and they can do things quickly and easily from here. And the danger is that they can access absolutely anything they want on the web. And even the school filters can't protect from a lot of the things that kids can work around and find the ways to. So there's the dangers of social media is that there's no filters on most social medias. There's misconnections because we all know, we've all had that moment where we send a text and we mean one thing, but the tone of our text is completely different because there is no tone in text. So what we actually meant to say, maybe we were trying to be very purposely sarcastic, but it didn't come across as sarcastic to people we send. Teenagers are experiencing this at an alarming rate, and it's driving them away from having beneficial relationships with their peers. Students have this untrue true love, and that can be something as simple as students primarily ask each other out via Snapchat now. So they'll send like just a wink face to a girl, and that is basically a marriage proposal for a lot of these students. And so that is giving the fact that true love is cheapened because they have undue pressures to have a boyfriend or have a girlfriend at an early age. And as we'll talk later, there's alarming statistics about pornography that pornography and exposure to pornography absolutely cheapens and degrades what love is. And students that are exposed to that, even through social media, are losing their innocence, but they're losing their future in terms of what true love looks like.
Yeah, additionally, the point we make here is undeveloped relationship skills, across the board, from eye-to-eye contact, handshakes, consistent, conversations, and then on down to really what a relationship is. It's not just a follow back on Instagram or Facebook and they look at all their friends. It's doing life. And when someone hurts you, you don't just send a huge text back, just blowing them up and blasting them without having to deal with it face to face, reading the emotions, knowing how your words are affecting them. We really see this next generation being probably one of the dumber generations as far as social skills goes, and not picking up on cues, on really going the distance in a relationship, which, like Zach alluded to, the untrue true love, and those relationship skills aren't being honed and refined, and they're finding the easy way out, just doing whatever they want whenever they want by looking at whatever they want on their devices. Masquerading is definitely something they're hiding behind the filters, making every photo look awesome so that they're living this adventurous, wonderful, scandalous life while all the time they're in their room by themselves, feeling more alone and disconnected than ever, is really a pitfall to watch out for with smartphones and social media. The last two, lack of sleep and sexting. It's really alarming to see how apathetic the students we've seen in junior high and high school are across the board. And so when I looked at it, I was like, yeah, that's so true. Like, you need sleep to be healthier, to eat healthier, to feel more energized, to be focused and passionate about life and activities. But if you're just looking at the next thing that's going to pull up on your feed and you're scrolling looking for that engaging thing, you're going to lose sleep and then lose motivation, not be content. And then sexting is really they feel this undue pressure to send a sexual image or talk about things that are inappropriate because they're masquerading behind these devices and not knowing the social relational setting in which you have these healthy conversations normally. It's now led to a really perverted conversations using these devices. So the really tone and the problem this brings up is a just hardening of students' hearts towards God's word and towards God's plan and purpose for them. And the more they get distracted and really busy looking at social media and these phones, their heart is going to continue to be hardened. And so Zach's going to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, a few weeks ago I gave a message for Brandon's students at the high school ministry, and I talked about the message I called it was Check Your Pulse, and it was basically how do we diagnose our hearts and where our hearts are at, because we all know that we can put whatever filters we want on our students' phones. We can block everything from our students' phones, but unless they are consistently examining where their hearts are, they're going to find ways to sin, no matter what. You can block every video game in your house, but students are going to go to a friend's house and they'll lie to you about the fact that they played Grand Theft Auto, which is the #1 video game amongst teens, which glorifies prostitution, gang violence, and misogynistic treatment of women. And they're going to go play these kind of games. They're going to go see R-rated movies. And so unless we have these conversations with them about where their hearts are at, consistently checking in on them, all the stuff that Brandon and I can give you will be for naught unless you guys as parents can have these conversations with your kids. So what I told the students is we have this habit of as Christians, we'll declare that we're going to follow Jesus, but then sometimes if we get put in a bad environment, we get sucked back into our bad practices or our old ways of life. I had a friend in college who was an aerospace engineering major. He was one of the smartest people I've ever met. And like this professional guy, he'd wear like suits to class. He was that guy that everyone like, he set the curve on every test. And so he's a brilliant guy that lived in my dorm suite area at Long Beach. But he'd have this friend that he had from middle school that would come and visit once in a while. And every time this friend was there, it was like my friend was a completely different person. He would revert back to like a 12-year-old. I'd like hear laughter and I'd look in and they were like playing Mario Kart and like kicking each other. I'm like, are you like 8? Like what's happening? Because he had this way of reverting back to his prior habits. And so Paul sees that Christians are doing this in Ephesians 4. And he tells them in verse 18 and 19, he tells, don't be the way that people who don't know Christ are. Stop walking in the direction that people who don't know Christ are. You're different than that. Your lives have to look different than that. So in 18 and 19, he says, they are darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them. Due to their hardness of heart, they have become calloused and have given themselves up to sensuality, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. And that their hard hearts have caused them to become ignorant and alienated from God. But even we as Christians, we'll alienate ourselves, even though we don't have these hearts of stone, and the Bible says that we've been given a tender, responsive heart of flesh. We will still alienate ourselves from God because our hearts can get sick, and they get sick on our own doing. And Jeremiah 17:9 says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? Who can diagnose it? Who can understand it? Most people, and a lot of your children, are walking around not knowing that the condition of their hearts is sick. They think that because they go to church on Sundays or they go to church on Tuesdays or Wednesday nights, that they are so much better than everyone else. And as a public school teacher for the last 6 years, I can tell you that as I walk around this campus of Atascadero Middle School, or as Brandon goes and visits Atascadero High School, sometimes it's really hard to distinguish the Christians from the non-Christians. And sometimes it's even worse. Because the teachers over there know I'm a pastor, I'm the first one to hear when a Christian screws up. And they've got that kind of target on their back. But, and a lot of that is, yes, everyone's going to sin, everyone's going to make mistakes. But there's sometimes, man, I walk around that school and I hear these Christian kids saying things that you wouldn't believe. And they're wearing their High Life shirts, their Hume Lake shirts, and their Hume Lake hats. And man, it's heartbreaking, but they don't even realize how sick and twisted they are because they're telling these jokes about girls or whatever it is so God sees and looks down on us and says, notice that our hearts are sick. He saw this. And they weren't just sick, but they're spiritually dead. And so there's this amazing promise that I shared with the high school students that God makes in Ezekiel and 36:26 when he says, I will give you a new heart and a new spirit I will put within you, that I will remove from you this heart of stone, and I will give you a tender and responsive heart of flesh. About 600 years later, when Jesus was killed on the cross, when the centurions came and they put the spear through his side, the Bible says that blood and water flowed out. And it took people a long time to figure out why that was true, why the Bible would write that water flowed out with blood. And that we found out much later that's a medical thing. And it indicated that the pericardium, the heart, had burst, that it had literally ruptured, and that Jesus, ultimately, he died of a broken and ruptured heart, that he exchanged his heart for ours in a literal exchange. So I tried to challenge the students, said, when you accept Christ, you don't have to go back to the way that your life was. You don't have to live this old life because your life should look different than everyone else's because he's given you a new heart so you can live a new life. So in Luke 6:45, it says, the good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of the evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so your heart, and therefore your actions, must look different. And you can have this conversation with your students. Where is your heart? How does your heart look in a posture to God? And then the second part of that was Proverbs 4:23. It says, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life. And I challenged the students, and I said, you have to protect your heart like your life depends on it, because it really does. That God cares about the conditions of our hearts, and he cares about where our hearts are at. One of the scariest moments of my life happened just a few months ago. My mom was out walking with my dad. They go on walks every night together. And they live in Paso Robles, and they're out there walking on Oak Flat Road, kind of by on the lake road, and they've got their little Shih Tzu dog walking with them, and he's this like heavy old Shih Tzu, little tiny dog, and my dad starts like having trouble breathing, and my mom's noticing this. She's like, why is the little dog in better shape than you right now? Like, that doesn't make any sense. How come you're panting more than this tiny dog? So they took him in to just get checked out. He had no pain, no chest pain, anything. And the doctors, they figured out that his heart was sick, that his left main artery, which is called the Widowmaker, was 95% blocked. And in 10% of the population, your right artery doesn't work. And my dad hereditarily didn't know this, falls in that 10% of the population. So really he had 5% total of working artery. He should have had a full-blown heart attack. He should probably be dead. It's a miracle. It is absolutely God's will in his life. So it was scary because we all show up at the hospital. He was fine one day, and the next day he's having emergency double bypass heart surgery and is getting kind of wheeled in. And he's okay, praise God, and he has a new heart. But imagine if he got this new heart and they went, awesome, thanks, doctor, and then just went back to living the way his life was before. And he wasn't like a super unhealthy guy at all, but if he just went and started eating like 5 cheeseburgers a day, he just started drinking 4 pots of coffee every morning, he's chain smoking, like all this, he has this new heart. He's been given this gift. He was diagnosed with a sick heart, he repaired the heart, and now he goes back to living the way he was. And there's going to be accountability there, because my dad may want a cheeseburger once in a while, and now my mom gets to be like, no, you can't do that, because we're not going back to the way you were. So the doctors came into the waiting room after this, and they sat my brother and I down and said that this condition's hereditary, and there's a really high percentage. If a dad has it, there's a really high percentage that his sons will be in that 10% of the population as well. And so the doctor said by age 30, I should really need to go get my heart checked. And now imagine if I had listened to that conversation from the doctor, because if it is hereditary and they catch it early on, it's not a big deal, right? They're going to diagnose it. They're going to put it. I'll have a quick surgery. They'll put a stent in, and I'll be okay. But imagine if I just went to them and said, "All right, thanks for your advice," and I just left, and I never got my heart checked out, and I never got it diagnosed. That would be stupid. Like if there's a 1% chance that my heart is sick, then I need to have it examined. I need to have it checked out. But I can't do it on my own. I need a doctor to examine my heart. I need a cardiologist to examine my heart. I wouldn't know how to diagnose my physical heart, and some of your kids don't know how to diagnose their spiritual hearts. And that might be what you're for. And if you don't know how to diagnose their spiritual hearts, then point them to us, or point them to their hub leaders and have them help diagnose where their hearts are at spiritually. But someone, a role model, either you or a hub leader or us, someone in these kids' lives has to be having this conversation with them. Where is your heart? And examining to diagnose whether their heart is sick, because unless they know their heart is sick, they're not going to view their sin as evil and corrupt. In fact, the more that people sin in these areas, the more callous we know this about sin. The more callous we can become to it, the harder our hearts are, the less it looks like sin to us, the more appealing it looks to us. And especially with the stuff that we're talking about today with technology, this is one of the easiest sins to just hide behind. And one of the easiest sins to just leave in the dark. And we want to, as Christians, expose the sin and make it come to light.
Yeah, and so a lot of this stuff, as I was researching it, it was convicting and eye-opening for even my own heart and my own life. And that's where we want to encourage you as parents. As you hear this, even last session, some parents were like, I need this for me. I'm going to put these boundaries for my phone. And I said, yeah, that's what my wife and I have done for our phones, because we're sinners and we're born into sin, and we're raising sinners who are born into sin. And so it is a heart issue. This is just one channel and one device that can become a vice in your kids' lives. And so as we talk about these guardrails or boundaries, as Zach said, basically it is a heart issue. And so we have on the back of that first page how to talk to your kids about limits and boundaries. The most important thing is your kid's heart. The most important thing is that their heart is full of love from God, from you, and they really know that you love them, you care for them, you have their best interest in mind. And so when you set up guardrails or you set up filters or you say, hey, let's restrict use of your phone, it's not because you're this tyrant who's angry at them and want to punish them, but you love them and you care for them and you want God's best for them. And if they know that, then it'll help that conversation continue to progress. And so we want to spend a few minutes here just taking a look at these slides, that they would know that the most important thing is love for them from God and from you, your relationship, connecting to them, not just your phones, and being engaged by spending time with them. And we have a couple boundaries that we'd love to just talk through and really just share with you how to have these boundaries set up and how to ask questions. So we see, as the next slide comes up, ask them why they like video games and the video games they like to play. As Zach shared earlier, Grand Theft Auto is not just a video game like Super Mario Brothers or Tetris like you may be accustomed to. It's a game that literally encourages you to break as many laws as you can and avoid the FBI once all of the police and FBI forces are called after you, to pick up hookers and have your way with them in the car behind a back alley and then beat and kill them. That's what you do in the game to beat the game. And so it's horrible. And that's what, as a kid, I remember going over to my friend's house when it first came out, Grand Theft Auto 1, and going, man, this is a different game. I'm used to like playing 007 with Bond and multiplayer. Now we're like role playing out these real life things that I've seen in movies, heard talked about at school, but now I'm actually doing it in this alter ego, alter reality video experience. And the ultimate result is this generation, 18 to 30 year olds, being called the lost boys because they'd rather play video games and look at porn. And so these questions really start that conversation and dialogue. What games are you playing? Who are you playing them with? Why do you like to play it? Secondly, what are the pros and cons about playing video games versus being outside, playing sports, skateboarding, scootering, doing, sports and athletics? What's the pros and cons? And just talking to them and dialoguing about that. Thirdly, tell them what pornography is. It's alarming how many kids don't know what it is, and all of a sudden they get exposed to it, and they're like, wow, this is interesting. My brain's doing this thing. Emotions, this is kind of intriguing, but I kind of feel wrong and shameful, but I don't know what it is. Tell them flat out, it's people without clothes on, people with only their birthday suit on, and start that conversation young at an early age, so when they see it, they identify, yep, this is pornography. I've talked to my parents about this. I can go to them with this. But if that conversation isn't brought up, as maybe awkward as that is to start the conversation, they're full of shame, and it's even more awkward having them with the burden of responsibility to bring it to you, going, hey, I saw this. What is it? Can you help me process? That's not going to happen. But if you go to them at an early age, creating that safe environment, it's the best opportunity, best chances you'll have of your kids coming to you when they do stumble into something like that.
Yeah, we know that's a hard ask. I mean, that's a hard conversation to have with your kid. But we know that the results and what is happening to this generation of students because of pornography is devastating. And it's a conversation that's hard, but it's worth having. Because as Brandon said, they're going to come and they're not going to know what these things are. Even for myself, I was raised in a home that I went to a private school from K through 8. I had no idea what pornography was. And I went to high school, and I was with my basketball freshman teammates, and they started asking me what pornography was, and I had kind of glimpsed a little bit and knew a little bit about it, but they're like, hey, you watch pornography, right? You do all this stuff. And I go, well, no, not really. And they went, oh, so you're gay then. I mean, you're probably gay because you're not looking at pictures of naked women. So these are 14-year-olds, right, having this conversation. And this is before, this is still like slow internet access, and we're still having this conversation. And I didn't know what to, I mean, no 14-year-old boy wants to be called gay. So, oh, no, yeah, I guess I can watch stuff. So then they took that as an opportunity to show me every kind of pornography they could. So that's who I was learning. That was who I was getting my knowledge from, was people who I couldn't trust because they wanted to make themselves feel better about their guilt and their shame, so they're going to bring someone else down with them and expose them. And we want to protect your kids from that. So yeah, it's a hard conversation, but it's much better to have hard conversations in safe environments, because they're going to have those conversations whether you like it or not. And it might be better that it's with you. It's definitely better it's with you.
So jump into the front page in the pamphlet we handed out. On the bottom, it says protecting parents, and there's a series of boundaries or guard rails we want to encourage you to dialogue and really having that conversation start with setting times where you can where you're allowing your kids to use their devices. Reminds them that the device is a privilege, not a right. And so by starting with setting that time, it does limit and lets them know, hey, this is an intentional time to use a computer for homework, and that's it, or use it to edit a video, and that's it. Let's not just click and search whatever we want and have access to whatever we want. But having those boundaries is going to really help not just train, but encourage your students to be making wise decisions on their devices on the internet. Secondly, a great boundary to have is charging your devices in a central and open place. So having it set up in your home where the phones, the tablets, the portable computers, laptops, all that stuff is charged in the kitchen, docked. It removes the temptation from late night, just web searching, viewing things they shouldn't look at, watching videos, playing video games, all that in the privacy of their own bedroom. And thirdly, know their accounts and passwords. It's a privilege, not a right, to have these devices. It's a privilege to have Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, these apps that are portals into the web where they can post photos, say things that are going to damage themselves and damage maybe even your reputation. And so to start having those conversations of, yeah, you can have this, but here's the account password. The reality is you can get that information and they can be at their friend's house and set up a private Instagram account without your knowledge. And so you think you have their account info, login info, you're seeing them, and it's all daily Bible verses and Spurgeon and theology, and you're like, wow, my kid's just phenomenal. All the while they have this other account that they're posting all this other stuff to, and that's where their friends are seeing, because that's the one they follow all their friends with and you don't know. So again, knowing all their accounts and passwords is a good step, but having a conversation with them, knowing you love them and care for them, leads us to our fourth point.
So trust and verify, and this just, we've said this already, but just know who they communicate with, have a good honest conversation about who their friends are. When you develop that trust level with them, when you're friends with them, and they can have those conversations with you openly and honestly, that's where the most success will happen. Start while they're young. If your kids aren't young, better late than never, and start having those conversations now. And then there's the sign a contract. Brandon gave, we have a sample one here that you feel free to use or make your own or adapt it or however you want. But if you're going to give a kid a smartphone, chances are they're not paying for their phone bill and they're not paying for their internet usage. And therefore you can be the bad guy here to them and say, hey, if you're going to have a phone, this is the expectations of it. Brandon, you want to talk through that?
Yeah, I found this online and it was a great resource, so I had to put it in your hands. And I've only heard good things about cell phone agreement and contracts. I know some of you maybe are late in the game with having your students and kids having these devices already, but even to go back and just own it. Hey, this would have been a great resource had I had it before I gave you the phone, but being what it is, here's the agreement we're going to stick with going forward, because like Zach said, you're in my house, my rules. But ultimately, we have this relationship. I love you. You know I love you. I want God's best for you. And a couple of these are really helpful. Number 4 on the contract, if you have it in front of you. I will not send or receive naked photos ever. I understand that there could be serious legal consequences that could put my parents and my future at risk. It's just a great conversation starter, if nothing else, the contract, to just put it in front of them. It's a neutral piece of paper. It's not you attacking them, saying that they're this perverted kid that's going to look at all this stuff or send all this stuff, but it's saying, hey, this is a reality. Here's these articles. Here's what we're faced against in this culture. Number 5, I'll never search for porn or anything else that I wouldn't want my grandma finding. So you might just say, hey, every once a month your grandma's going to get your phone and just look through it and see what you're doing. But it's a great, just again, conversation starter. What are you doing? Jesus sees everything. What are you posting? How often are you on your phone? These are just great guidelines to agree to. And then at the end, it says, in the blue box, it says, if I have any questions, I should talk to my parents face to face. Again, this generation is growing up with 0 to no people skills, and if there's any miscommunication, misunderstanding, oftentimes it's a text or whatever. But we're encouraging, even with this, to just, hey, let's have a conversation face to face, get clarity if needed on any questions you may have. So this is again a great resource. And one of the questions that comes up, maybe, when should you put a phone in your kids' hands? When should you have this cell phone contract in front of your kids? Steve Jobs, the guy who invented Apple Macintosh computers, phones, iPods, iPads, and anyone else who's in the tech industry will say the same thing. But when an interviewer from New York Times asked Steve Jobs how his kids love the iPod and iPad, Steve responded and basically had the reporter put his foot in his mouth when Steve said, "My kids have not touched an iPod or an iPad. We have strict rules and guidelines that our kids are not to be on the computer Monday to Friday and only a half hour on weekends." So when your kids tell you, "Wow, you're being a Nazi and a jerk and you're not letting me use my phone and all my friends are," hey, the guy that invented this did way more research than I could, you could as parents, and he knew the pitfalls and the potential of these devices that are so powerful, and he wants to protect his kids by having healthy adult conversations around the dinner table, discussing history, maybe, since we're followers of Jesus, theology, who is God? What is he doing? How have you seen God in your life? And even as a 4-year-old who's pumped, a 4-year-old son of mine who's pumped on Jesus and stories and stuff, he's still like, I don't want to talk about it right now. Well, imagine if all I was doing was on my phone, never engaging, never pushing, never prodding the subject, and then all of a sudden he gets a phone. There's no way we're going to have deep conversations. And so Steve Jobs knew that. Anyone in the tech industry knows that, and they have probably the most severe boundaries than any parent in any family on tech devices, because they know the potential of the problems they could cause. So it's in your hands to decide when your kids should have a device that's smart enough to access everything, not just send and receive photos or phone calls. But we're here to encourage, hey, there are some great apps, great things and settings you can use that we're going to get into now on how to protect your kids using smartphones.
Yeah, none of the apps and software that we're sending to you guys, of course, none of this is the authoritative Word of God. Like, it's not found in the Bible. This is suggestions, and we know that the way you parent your kids may look different, and so we're trying to give you guys some strategies. Brandon has younger kids. His oldest is 4. I do not have any kids at this point. I've been married about a year, and so I deal with teenage students all the time, but I had a parent in the 915 service. I must look really old or something. I assumed I had high schoolers, and so we know that you're at a different stage of life than us, but this is just what we've seen, because our job is to interact with your students and to be around your students. These are just some good things, and we want to get to some questions, so we'll go through them pretty quick, but Brandon's going to talk about some filters, and then I'm going to talk about just some of the apps that your students are using.
Yeah, before we get into the filters, there's a couple of questions I want to put in front of you guys about how to talk to your children about limits. And so if we could get, if you could put up slide number 19, Eric, that'd be helpful. So these are some great questions to ask your teenagers or even your students. What apps are popular right now? What apps are they using, and why do they like them? Show them online articles or newspaper clippings, and when you see something online, ask them what they think about it. This is the best way to lead your students and your kids, by asking questions. And a lot of times, parents come to me and say, well, I don't know, I don't have resources to ask some of these questions. And the answer to that is translator@axis.org will send out an email from this. Axis is a organization that does pop culture investigation, gives resources. Jeff Atherstone mentioned it last Sunday. And if you're a parent of kids that are in elementary school, into junior high, and in high school, it's almost too late, but there's still hope, because God's a sovereign God, and he's a God of miracles. So he can do stuff in the later teenage years, but in those early years when they're starting to become exposed to stuff, it's great to be exposed with them as you hear about things that are sung about or talked about on the playground or at school. And so that's a great newsletter to subscribe to, and really asking those questions to get inside their head. What are they listening to? What are they interacting with on their devices? What do they want to interact with? And so the good news is there are some tools and apps you can use to control and to lock down their phones and devices. On the iPhone, it's a little easier than the Android in the sense that they've designed it to be very secure, and their apps that they allow to be used and the phones they sell, they promise will not catch fire and blow up. And so I've been saying it for years. Finally, everyone's caught on. Androids, you run the risk. It might blow up. It might not. You never know. So in addition to the physical device functioning, there's some great software things that are in your handbook that just the guided access. If you go to general accessibility, you can put guided access on, limit what the phone's capable of doing. Parent controls, general. You go into systems preferences or settings, general restrictions. You can shut down all the apps, the app store, so they cannot get apps on their device without your password. And so it really turns this computer back into a phone where they can call, receive calls, send and receive text, and that's it. In addition to that, if you have an Android and you went with a cheaper option, running the risk it might catch fire. I understand. Again, you probably picked up on it. I'm kind of brand loyal to Apple, but again, it's not the word of God. It's just Brandon's word, and it doesn't mean anything. Android's recently come out with a lot of restrictions in apps and also guided steps that we've put in your hands to making your Android device, once again, a call and receive calls, a send and receive text message device only. In Google Chrome, you can do the same thing. YouTube, you can get on the app and select safe mode, which I recommend you doing because YouTube, you can put any photo over a video, and they don't really screen the photos. So you'll search like fishing, and all of a sudden there's a naked girl on the front of the video, and the filter won't catch it. And so put safe mode on for browsing within YouTube. Windows phones, Google Chrome, they all, if you Google it, they'll all have guides on how to use parental controls. And the goal of that is really for you as parents to have conversations, because again, if you start locking down their phone, restricting the usage of their phone, they're going to wonder why, what's going on. And so having conversations and putting up the three main guardrails that we're going to talk through as we talk through some apps. The first being web filtering software. We're going to share with you some of those that we found helpful. Secondly, text and social networking monitoring, stuff we've kind of been talking about. The usage of their text messaging, phone calls. You can look, whether you're with Verizon, AT&T, call your carrier, go online. You can see what phone's making what phone calls, what messages are being sent to whom. And lastly, the location finder. So if you have a student who's been lying to you a lot, you can put Find My iPhone, and it's basically a tracking device. And you can find out where their iPhone is. They may ditch their iPhone, which highly unlikely because it's basically their left arm. It's their third arm now. And so there's also apps that'll do the same thing that we'll talk through next.
So just a quick note on before Brandon shares some of the apps and software for you. That you guys have probably figured this out too, but if you have an Apple, you can go to Safari, you can go into private mode, and that hides any search history that your students would have looked at, and I'm sure your students have figured it out. If you haven't, you can go into private mode. Google Chrome has incognito mode. It's the same thing. If they have an Android and they download Chrome, Firefox has a private browsing mode. It doesn't really matter which web server you're using or search engine you're using. They can find a way to delete search history, block search history, hide search history from you. And so some of these apps may be a good option for you. They're not the most convenient apps in the world. They're a little clunky in different parts, but you can have that conversation with your student, say, hey, your purity to me is, and your integrity and you growing up to be a man or a woman of God is so much more important to me than if you can get to this website 3 seconds faster.
Yeah, so some of the protecting apps or softwares available. First, I'm going to encourage you to check out RPact. And this is a free online, and it also has an app for you to control. Basically, it schedules the use of devices. So I find it really helpful for me because there's times where I'm tempted just to grab my phone, check out what is a good deal for a new iPhone or Apple Watch or MacBook. You get the idea. on eBay, right? But if I lock my phone down at 6 o'clock when I go home, then from 6 to 10 when I'm with my kids, I'm with my kids. There's no temptation to grab my phone and see what's happening with the baseball score because that app's been removed. So our pact literally removes all of the apps off of your phone, allowing you just to send and receive calls, send and receive text, and there's no email either. So it literally locks it down. It's free. Add as many phones to your account as you want, and it just is a weekly scheduler. So it schedules your week from Sunday to Saturday, allows you to say, okay, Saturday from 4 to 6, I want to use my phone because it's me time and I want to connect with things. But, Monday, I'm at work, I need my phone from 9 to 5, but after 5, I really don't need any distractions. I need to be with my kids. Your kids are doing homework, they don't need their phones, so lock that sucker down until 8:30 to 9. Maybe you give them some free time on their devices, and then at 9 o'clock it's time to wrap up, unwind, head to bed, so you lock it down again. And you just set the scheduler one time, and then it goes. Net Nanny is another way just to kind of control and the web filter. And then the others listed. Life 360 is a family locator, and that's addition to the Find My iPhone. If you have a Android, you could use that. And then there's the Family Guardian, which is, again, kind of a filter. Checks out what their web history is. But like Zach said, a lot of these, there's workarounds. You can go on Twitter or some of the news apps and search a web browser and use that as a web browser as a workaround, so that some of these filters you might be paying for or putting in place could be, worked around or gone under to avoid detection. Ignore no more is unavoidable. If you're trying to call your kid and they ignore you, this will shut it down. It's a mom-made app which allows parents to lock their kids' phones until they call you back. So, genius. I'm probably going to buy that just to have my wife call me every once in a while, No, just kidding. That's what Jenna's going to do for me. If I'm in a meeting and it's ignore, she's like, all right, your phone's locked down until you call me. It's emergency. But there's some fun apps like that. You can have fun with your kids. I'm sure they'll love that.
Feel free to make us the bad guys, by the way. Just be like, sorry, it's Zach and Brandon. They're the ones who gave us all these apps.
Yeah. Kids Place is free, Android only though. Does similar features. Canary, a lot of these do the similar features of filtering, screening your search history. Canary is a unique one where it shuts the phone down for driving and texting. It's the number one killer of teens. So Canary is one to look into if your teens at the driving age and you know that they love to text and drive. Could be a temptation for them. So they could get Canary. It's a free trial. It's $15 or $14.99 for a lifetime subscription. K9, Triple X Church has one. The K9 is a free. I think Triple X Church is a small fee. Basically, it replaces your Safari, your Google Chrome web browser. It's a little clunky. It's not as smooth and clean, but it's a small, inconvenience to be protected and to have your web history sent to an accountability partner. Screen time is an option for you to access your kid's screen and see what's going on their phone. MobiChip is the highly recommended filter web block program that'll really protect the search history, so there's no accidental searches or something remotely including pornographic things. It'll lock it down and block it for 5 devices for $39.99 a year. So those are some great software things that are available for you guys to look into and check out. Now we'll get into the apps and kind of review them and give you some helpful insights. So Zach's going to
most of these apps you're probably at least familiar with, so we'll put them up on the screen. But like Facebook is the first one listed there, and Facebook's kind of going the way of the dinosaur, or the way of the MySpace, which was the social media dinosaur. Most kids don't want anything to do with Facebook because most of their parents are on Facebook, so there's no need for them to be on Facebook. Most Facebook users are now just posting Donald Trump articles or pictures of their babies, so that's not what your teenagers want to see. Some teenagers still may want Facebook, and if they do, then absolutely all these rules still apply in having conversations. But the big ones for teens right now are Twitter's not as much anymore, but it's Snapchat and Instagram. And Instagram now is trying to catch up with Snapchat, where they have the stories that you can post and send things really quickly. They both have direct messaging where you can send whatever you want, and this is where sexting has become a huge issue because Snapchat has the 7-second and then they're gone. There's the browse feature in Instagram and Snapchat, which both have pornographic images there, and so students have been exposed to, and maybe not full pornographic images, more just links to porn, but there's enough shown there that students will absolutely click on the links. Snapchat has been inundated with this kind of content because these people are targeting your children, and so and they're good at it. And so Snapchat and Instagram are two big pitfalls for teenagers, and those are the ones that your teenagers are going to ask you if they can have. And if you between the two, Instagram is technically the safer one, but again, either one, you're going to need to have those conversations with them. You're going to need to have access to their account. You can control, to an extent, what they post. You can't control what their friends are posting. And so, as a teacher, I've seen this trend where boys are getting sucked into looking at horrible things on Instagram. Girls are getting pressured to post increasingly risque pictures of themselves on Instagram. We've had sexting suspensions every year at the middle school level since I've been there. For the last 5 years, we've had multiple students get arrested for distribution of child pornography because that's what the boys don't realize is when they send a picture that their girlfriend has sent them out to their other friends, that's distribution of child pornography. And so we have this happen every single year for us, and a lot of these pictures are getting posted to Snapchat, and then they get exposed to the school. The other issue for Instagram is, and this is if you're a parent of a daughter, this is one that's especially horrifying to me, is the big thing that these boys like to do is do the they like their status and they rate the girls. So if a girl likes a certain picture, then they see who they like and they'll put their name there and give them a rate, and they'll assign a number to them based on how hot they think they are, a subjective score out of 10. So I've had multiple students come to me crying because they have all these boys say, I'm only a 2 on a 10 on this. And so they're basing their self-worth on what these teenage boys view them as on this Instagram account. And so if you're a parent of a teenage boy, that should sicken you too, and make sure that you have these conversations with your sons about how to treat women and not objectify women. And if you're a parent of a teenage daughter, have this conversation with her about, hey, this isn't something you need to buy into. This isn't something that you need to be a part of. A lot of these other, like Hot or Not's a similar thing. Kick is a similar thing. It's how you can rate students based on their objective or on their physical appearance, a subjective score. Tinder is a hookup app, and Musical.ly is a new one. This is the new popular one. It specifically targets preteens, 11, 12 to 13 year olds, and what it is, it's a lip syncing thing, which is in theory, it's a harmless thing. Students can post little 10-second vines of them lip syncing to their favorite songs. The problem is it doesn't stream any of the music that goes through. It doesn't block any of it. So there's incredibly inappropriate music. We have one of the slides has one of this classic song. I mean, it has some good lyrics if you guys want to take a look at it. All she want to do is smoke that broccoli. And that's weed. So we didn't know that broccoli is now a term for weed. We're just figuring these things out. And then you can read the rest of it. I mean, it's some incredible poetry that your kids are listening to. Some really classy stuff. And so these are the kinds of things that are being spread on all of these apps.
So this song, I looked at it last night and grabbed the lyrics. And on my Spotify, I opened it up, and that was the artist that said, hey, come listen to this. So it's literally everywhere when you look at apps and look at their what they're doing and what they're talking about, and so again, you can put safeguards, you can put some things in place, you can limit apps, but if you say, hey, don't use Musical.ly, but then listen to Spotify, and then you have access to all of this music, and really there's protections in place, but again, it comes back to the heart. Where's your student's heart at? Can they make these wise decisions to discern, hey, this is what everyone's listening to, but it's not helpful? So some PC protection. Again, I'm going to bring up the fourth point there is Covenant Eyes, Safe Eyes, and XXX Church. Go to those websites, read about what they're doing. Covenant Eyes and Safe Eyes have been kind of the leading web filters and mobile filters in addition to the apps I shared earlier. XXX Church does have filters, but they're more the recovery. They're more going to the heart of the matter. They've been in the porn industry for many years, helping people in the industry get out of the industry, recover, find Jesus, and they have a lot of great articles on and a free ebook that I've read on how and when to talk to your kids, preteens, about the dangers of pornography, as well as some other resources and a browser and some other things as well. So that's highly recommend going to those 3 sites, checking it out. With music, if you don't understand the lyrics, Google it. A quote we got from a teenager, former teen, he said this about TV, and he said, "I'm glad my parents didn't let me watch TV during the week because it really helped me develop my social skills. I was forced to have more interactions with people, which in turn helped me become more mature in what I thought and believed at a younger age." And so a lot of times kids think I need to get be on the up and up of what's culturally relevant, musically, video games, movies, but really limiting that and putting books in their hands, having intentional dialogue and conversations with your teens is going to help them in the long run, because like we were sharing earlier, this generation, 18 to 30-year-olds, is now being considered as the lost boys generation, because they're working at dead-end jobs and sleeping in their mom's basement, and when they do sleep a few hours, but mainly just playing Grand Theft Auto and watching porn. And that's a really detriment and a tragic state of where that demographic is, and it's in large part because that's what the cultures served them up for years, and everyone says this is good, just watch porn, this is good, just play this game, this is good, just not work hard and not have these intentional conversations. So with video games, you can check out a website, Plugged In, check out the violence, what are they watching, what are they partaking in, and lastly, what all of this really leads to is what I like to call the porn path. And where students, back in the days before technology and gadgets, students would have to go and find somebody whose dad maybe had a porn stash that they found to see some of these images. But nowadays it can be sent to them on their device, or if they're at home on their smart TV trying to find that Bible cartoon and they mistype the word, and all of a sudden there's some pornographic images that display. And so now the average age where a kid is exposed to pornography is 8 years old. And a lot of teens, as I gave you some stats there, 70% of teens said that porn was seen as normal by their peers at school, and 80% of teens say that porn is too easy to access or stumble upon on the internet. And the porn path, really, for you guys that haven't heard the science behind it, for years they've said, oh, it's healthy, it's normal, you're maturing, whatever, you can just watch it. But now the science has backed up what Jesus said, don't look at a woman lustfully. And science has found in our brains, especially as the brains are forming, the synapses and the dopamine that are triggered and wiring is triggered when you see a pornographic image. And so in their brains, they're being wired to think that way when they see that image. And so it's called the porn path, where when they see that image, it really just makes those connections and releases that high. And so they keep going back to that path for that stimulation, for that feeling. And back in the day, I remember I was skating in a ditch, and my friend was like, hey, come follow me. And we went through this well-beaten path down into the creek on north end of Atascadero, and super just remote. And he's like, come here, there's some porn magazines. And I was like, what? I'm not going in the river to find this little stash of dirty magazines. Like, what's going on? How did you even know about this? And even then, in early 2000s, there were still magazines that you had to find some tree that they were buried under and like dig them up. But I'm just appalled at how, whether it's your Xbox, your PlayStation, whatever device now you have, most likely it connects to the internet. So Xbox, PlayStation, and I remember in college, my friends like, dude, I'm struggling. I'm just able to go from my video game to porn. And now that article came out that this is the lost generation, I'm like, yeah. Because even in early 2000s, we saw that shift. And so now it's even more important to have this conversation about the effects that porn has on their brain. And so when they see it, they know they can identify it and know that there's a safe place to talk about what they're struggling with, whether it's you as a parent, youth pastors, our volunteers. That's what we're here for. So as we close, we hope this was helpful, and we'd like to open it up for conversation. and questions. And really, our heart is that this would just kickstart, spur on more conversations. Some of you have probably heard similar seminars given, read books or articles that maybe have helped you. You can feel free to share that in the next couple minutes as we field questions.
Yeah, we know that church will be kind of wrapping up here in just a minute. So if you have a student that you've got to pick up, a kid or junior high or whatever, feel free if you want. If you don't have to stick around, we'll just kind of be here to field some questions just for a few minutes. But we don't want to have your kids just kind of be standing out there waiting for you either if that's not what you want. So we'll be here. Do we have any questions from you guys? Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks. All right.
Any other questions?
And that just goes back to, I mean, we're all sinners. So if our heart is bent towards sin, we're going to find a way to do it, right? And so, these are some, at least to make it more difficult, and then hopefully those conversations that you have with them will produce good fruit.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that because I'm not a huge gamer, especially Minecraft. I do know, like, with some online gaming, you can, obviously communicate, send messages, and there's potential. I don't know for sure, but there could be potential for just images or things being sent back and forth. But if it's, I'll have to look into that to know exactly what that.
Yeah, Minecraft is a fairly safe as far as, the kids could communicate and say things, but as far as like finding explicit things on Minecraft, that won't happen. Yes, and that's the issue with any online gaming, is it opens the doorway to communicate with anyone, adults that are preying on children, that kind of stuff. Minecraft is significantly the most popular game among preteens. Yep. Which is good. Yeah, you're having that conversation.
Any other questions or comments?
Yep.
Yeah, and the most popular calculator Hide It is called Hide It Pro, and it's in there under the apps to look for. So if you see a Hide It Pro, but a lot of them don't even say Hide It Pro. They're just a calculator or flashlight apps. Those that you're like, why do you need a flashlight? Those are the ones that are made to hide photos, and they have their own password. So you'd have to really, hey, what's the password to get into your calculator or to get into your flashlight? So definitely know the apps, and that's as easy as restricting apps being downloaded without your password, and then you restrict them from putting apps like that, randomly on your phone. Thanks for bringing that up. Well, any other questions?
Cool. I'll just go ahead. I'll pray for us real quick, and then we'll be good to go. God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for these parents that are here because they care about raising their children in a way that will bring up godly young men and women. And just thank you for the developers of these filters that have worked so hard to protect families and to protect lives and to protect future husbands and future wives from all the baggage that comes with things that have such easy access. God, would you allow us to be vigilant in conversations with our children? Would you allow us to be, as youth group leaders, would you allow Brandon and I to be vigilant in conversations with our hub leaders and our students? Would you allow these kids to grow closer to you and realize that their hearts are sick and that they need to have these conversations with their parents that are open and have good dialogue about what they're viewing and what they're seeing and what friends are exposing them to. Thank you that you are good despite all this evil in this world. And God, we look to you in this time. We ask these things in your name. Amen.